In honor of all of the snow that is currently hitting the Pacific Northwest, I thought at the beginning of this episode I would share a little special ritual that I have for when there's snow in St. Louis. And especially if it's like dusk or evening snow, so that there's like plenty of contrast against the dark background. What I like to do is I typically am in my pajamas or less and a bathrobe for sure because I need to protect myself from the cold. And I go and I microwave a coffee mug, an extra classy coffee mug with some Crevassier in it. And I'll go out and I'll watch the snowflakes fall and I'll sip on my warm little cocktail and makes me feel like there is peace on earth and goodwill towards folks.
TJ, we went live.
Well, you're welcome.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 145 of Sawdust Talk. We are joined tonight with our friend, Michael Alm, fellow Pacific Northwest person, and we are so excited that you're here. TJ is going to run through the sponsors real quick, and then we will get all into Michael.
All right, first and foremost, we got to thank Hannah and the Flip Mode squad out there at Surf Prep Sanding Systems. Sure, you can smooth out a surfboard. Sure, you can take the bumps out of your drywall. But if you want the finest finish and the smoothest wood to run through your fingers, well, you need to be using Surf Prep tools and abrasives. And Hannah's just the place to, Hannah's website is just the place to do that. Go to Surf Prep, use coupon code Sawdust Talk, save a little bit of money. And yes, the show does get a little bit of a kickback, but you won't be disappointed. It is mighty fine finishing tools. We also need to thank Layla over at Casey Bombshell Designs. She is hosting our website for our merch. If you are not prancing around in your bathrobe, sipping hot Crevassier in an oversized, extra comfy Sawdust Talk t-shirt, what are you doing with your life? Get with what the cool kids are doing. Buy some Sawdust Talk merch. Also, if you dig on Tattoo Flash inspired scroll saw art, you should also check out Layla's body of work. It is super rad. We need to also shout out Makers for St. Jude. Makers for St. Jude is on for 2025. We have set a goal of $50,000 raised to fight childhood cancer, and St. Jude is the charity that really does a great job of allocating funds to both their technology, their research, their solutions, and family support during a time that no family should have to go through alone. So if you want to make the cool stuff that you make, do something cool for someone who needs assistance, get a hold of Mike over at Woodworker versus Cancer or the Makers for St. Jude project and get involved and get awesome. Final thing is that there is a Patreon for Sawdust Talk for as little as $5 a month, less than the cost of a grande latte. You could be supporting cool makers like us in our endeavors to make this podcast even more professional, and or buy plane tickets to come see you in person at events like the upcoming Workbench Con. So yeah, that's our sponsors. And please check out Patreon/Sawdust Talk.
Mm-hmm. Michael Alm, welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Tell us who you are.
I'm Michael Alm. I'm in Seattle, Washington, and I make woodworking projects and videos on YouTube. Been doing it for about 8 years now, and I make pattern plywood. That's the thing that's kind of my signature thing that people know me from, where I take pieces of usually Baltic birch plywood, cut it into thin strips, and then cut it again and again and again until it makes all sorts of different fancy patterns. And I've been designing patterns, and I just made some today. I'm putting out a new video on pattern plywood tambour, another experiment. So yeah.
Heck yeah. And we were talking before we got started about being in Seattle now, but that's not where you started. So where did you come from? And how did you get to Seattle? Because now you're Pacific Northwest, like me.
I grew up in Kansas City, and we have now a very famous football team. Keep going strong
Now,
and so I grew up in Kansas City, and then I went to college at St. Louis. TJ and I were talking about our St. Louis connection earlier. I went to WashU out there, studied sculpture, and then when I was in high school, and I really love the mountains. I love skiing and backpacking and climbing and hiking and all that stuff. So when I graduated from college in St. Louis, TJ can attest, it's very flat in St. Louis. And so I decided to move to the mountains, and I just literally was like, what would be a fun city to live in? And I thought Seattle sounded cool. I had never been before, and I just booked a flight out for a week and moved. I found a job while I was out here, and the rest was history. I just decided to move, and moved in September after I graduated college, and I within a year I had my own art studio going, and yeah, I love this city so much. So I've been here for, oh my God, almost like 18 years or so.
Okay, so you went from the barely realizable hills of a river city like St. Louis and moved to Seattle, where somehow every step that you take is uphill.
It's true. It's hillier than people know. I feel like when I came to visit, I was like, oh, like these are legit hills. Like if it snows here, you're screwed. You can't drive in Seattle when it snows.
But
even
how
if
is
you're
it
from
always
Boston and you're like, I've driven in terrible weather? Yeah, you can't drive in Seattle in the snow.
But it's always uphill. Every step that you take in Seattle is uphill.
Yeah.
You could be what you think is walking down towards the pier in the bay. It's uphill somehow.
Yeah. The trick is, the thing that I learned early on, is you don't step on the pothole or the manhole covers. I see out of towners, they step on the grates and the manhole covers, and that's how you slip downhill. Yeah.
And then it's all downhill from there.
She's on fire today. So let's talk a little bit about patterned plywood, or more specifically, in a world such as 2024, 23, and 25, where sourcing true Baltic birch is growing more and more difficult. Are you having to find different composite wood products?
I've found it easier the last year or two. So we had that big dip down when the tariffs were issued to Russia. Most of it comes from Russia, Baltic birch. So yeah, that restricted it for a while, but I've been able to find it. It's definitely more expensive, which is kind of not great, but it is it's available, at least here. I was able to actually I bought several sheets just a couple weeks ago. So it's still around, and I haven't really I mean, the thing is with making pattern plywood is you really don't use that much. You use I just made a whole bunch of pattern plywood with little tiny scrap pieces. So if you can find like a 2 foot by 2 foot piece of scrap, you can make loads. And I've started kind of conserving it. I've started veneering it. So this latest project, I'm actually using a resaw bandsaw and trimming off like 16th inch sections and then gluing that down. And so you really don't need as much as I used when I first started making this stuff.
I see.
Yeah. So even if we go into the dark ages of no Baltic birch plywood, we'll figure it out with the scraps.
Well, so I know there's bamboo products out there that some people are talking about enjoying the weight and the strength, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know if they're still squeaking those, 7 to 13 plies in a, 1/2 inch to 3/4 piece.
Yeah, I think Chris from A Glimpse Inside, he found some alternative stuff, and I think he did a video on it But yeah, he found some stuff that was made in South America that is it really isn't quite as many plies. I mean, nothing looks as good as Baltic birch plywood from what I found. So I'm hanging on to whatever I can get.
Gotcha.
So aside from Baltic birch plywood and all of that, you and I have a similar situation with something called a fixer-up house.
Yeah, I'm very familiar.
I would love for you to talk about your fixer-upper house because I have adored watching your transformations. The kitchen
Thanks.
transformation was fantastic, but please tell us about your house. How old is your house?
Yeah, it's 1940. It's a little bungalow, and I bought it 10 years ago. I got it when I was in a situation where like my art studio was sold because of a divorce, and I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like I was living in my art studio. My wood shop was right next to my living room. It wasn't the best situation. It was on the tracks down in Georgetown, and I ended up finding this really cool little bungalow with a giant garage outside. The garage is twice as big as the house, and so I bought it. It was more of a fixer up than I realized. It was in pretty rough shape. I didn't know what I was doing, and I spent the next year just getting it to a point where it was clean, safe. I knew what was going on in the walls. I redid the bathroom and stuff like that. But I ended up renting out the house in front, and then there's a living space above the garage. So where I film everything, there's like a 500, and then I converted the attic, which made it a 700 square foot living space. And for me, I don't know about you guys, if I have a shop, that's where all my stuff goes. So I don't really have a lot of other stuff. So I can live pretty small as long as I have a big shop. So this shop is 1,000 square feet. And so Ashley moved in 2020. Yeah. Yeah, she moved in 2020, and we've been living up there for the last 5 years. And then I had 8 years of renters, and then I was like, let's not renew or get new set of renters. And so I was like, okay, we're gonna do this. We were planning on getting married. We're planning on having a kid, and I was like, okay, we've got kind of like a year and a half of runway to do all this stuff and just tackle the house. So yeah, I ended up fully gutting it. 1940s house full of dangerous chemicals, and so you had to wear a lot of safety gear and be real careful. I took out the lath and plaster walls. I took out a load-bearing wall. I took out a chimney and a random brick wall that we found inside of a wall that I still don't know why it was there. And it ended up being what I was hoping would take a year, took about 18 months to go from start to finish, and pretty much did all of it myself, aside from some of, like, I didn't do electrical and I didn't do HVAC, and then drywall. Never do drywall. I will never do drywall ever again.
I do way too much of that.
Well, you're probably better at it than I am. I'm not proud of my drywall work.
It's an art.
It is an art. It is an art. We have these crazy
that you don't want people to know you have.
Yeah. No, that you'll get. I mean, unless you want that as your career, no, don't tell anybody that you're good at drywall. Yeah, I had these guys come in to do. My next door neighbor is a contractor, and so I got all the subcontractors from him. I just was like, "Hey, Keith, who do you use?" And he gave me these guys who are amazing at drywall. The people who hung the drywall, just as I didn't know, is that drywall hangers and drywall mutters are just 2 different crews. And the drywall was hung in a day, and then the mutters worked for I think it was almost 2 weeks. But I threw some curveballs at them with we have got these beautiful coved ceilings that are kind of the only like architectural thing that like I could lock onto in the house, like with design wise. I was like, what can I use here? Like the chimney was falling down, the fireplace facade was like in total shambles. The trim was falling apart. Like there's nothing, and it's 1940 home. It's pretty modest when it was built. It has oak floors, which are really cool, but they're like mixed. They're white oak and red oak, so it's kind of this fun. It's a funky house. It's like right on the end of the Great Depression, so you start seeing like some of they're like using scraps, like the headers. I don't know if I'm using the right term, but the top plate, that's what it is. The top plates are stitched together with the scraps from the boards they cut to make the studs. So you're like, oh, okay, these are scrappy people. They're like kind of throwing things together. So yeah, it's there wasn't a lot of architecture to lock onto, but I love the house. It's a really, really nice layout, and so yeah, the coves were the thing, and then we started adding arches into a whole bunch of areas, and I ended up adding that into kind of the design of the kitchen. 1940 is a weird era to try and replicate because there's not really sort of in between things. It's not quite you're not quite in the modern era, but you're also not quite like the like cottagey or I call it a bungalow, but it's not like a true bungalow, and it's not quite a craftsman. It's kind of in this weird gray area. So trying to decide on architectural elements to bring into the house was a challenge. But I'm really happy with how it's come out. We're living in there. We've been in there for the last 2 months since our daughter Maeve was born. We moved in right when she was born. I was hoping she would give me another week because I had about a week's worth of stuff to do, but I've been picking away at those things for the last couple of months on weekends when she's napping or when we've got a little bit of time, like when we have got an in-law in like taking care of the baby, I can knock out a closet or two.
That's awesome. Does this bungalow have a basement?
No, there's not a lot of basements in Seattle.
Interesting. So
yeah.
I grew up in a home that was built in the early 40s, and we were sort of on the backside of the atomic age when it was being built. And so all of the homes in the neighborhood I grew up in, we all had bomb shelters in our basement, right? And when you think bomb shelter, you immediately go to Hollywood, which is like a giant bank vault door and safe rooms. This was just like a little
Brendan Fraser in what is that movie where he's
Millennium Man? Did I dig that one out? But yeah, and so most of them just got converted to like dry pantries or like a fun playhouse or something like that. But it's a weird like 1940s house thing where like, yeah, sure, my house had a bomb shelter in it, right? Haven't met a whole lot of other people that have experienced bomb shelters in a house though. So I always like asking when I hear about houses from the 40s.
Yeah, I mean, if there was one, it was taken out a long time ago. But I don't think. Yeah, we didn't get. There's a crawl space, but that's about it. I thought about you start scheming when you're like, oh, I can remodel this whole house. I thought about digging out the crawl space and building a basement below, but that's too much work.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah. And I'm like, I don't want to film this. I don't want to I don't know. It just sounds miserable.
Yeah. There's a lot of wallowing when you do that. And I try to avoid wallowing for the most part. So
yeah, I had a buddy who did it up on Capitol Hill. He did dig for a client. He dug the whole basement out and then they had to pour the concrete in to do a new slab underneath. And they couldn't get the cement truck close enough. So they had to wheelbarrow the entire basement, and it was it must have been a 1,000 square foot basement. Yeah,
Jesus,
it's like no thanks.
Yeah, no.
So speaking of filming content, and because you are on YouTube, I watched your videos. They're fantastic.
Nice.
When it comes to doing a remodel, like you're doing, I found myself not filming certain things because it just takes so much longer to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
Did that affect your kitchen build? Because your kitchen build was insane.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, well, the stuff that I didn't want to film was like tile and trim and all
Mhm.
but I felt like I kind of wanted to have a complete arc for people who were following closely. The kitchen was super fun to film because I could film it in my shop and like the kitchen cabinetry. So like I kind of had two series going. I was like every I was working on both at the same time, but like one video would get released and it's like really home remodel-y, and then the next video would be released and it's some progress on the kitchen. And I looked forward to working on the kitchen, and I kind of dreaded mostly the filming. I don't mind doing the home remodel work, but respect to people who film that stuff, because like in attics and crawl spaces with all the debris and all the, it's just like you're on your knees half the time doing, you know, trim or doing tile. And I'm over it. I'm done with remodel content. I think that's that. I got it out of my system. In the last video, I talk about if anyone's like hopping onto the series and just wants to see an overview of it, I did a like kind of final tour of the house and Q&A, and I talk about, you know, I show old pictures of the house and talk through like what worked, what didn't. But but yeah, there's a lot of stuff that like like in hindsight I might have skipped over filming, but I don't know. Live and learn.
Jessie appears to be frozen, but I believe she'll be back. Let's talk a little bit about putting together tambour doors with
Oh yeah.
pattern plywood, because it looks, and I need to follow the series a little bit closer, but there's like a little bit of routing that takes place, and I feel like you're passing a router over the plywood in the wrong direction to put things into grooves. And I don't know, I only got a half a peek at what you were working on. Talk about that a little bit for me.
Yeah, so so the tambour, I've made tambour a couple times, and the tracks are always a challenge. But I was able to do it with a router like by hand this time. I did it with the Shaper Origin last time I did it, which was great, and I could like sort of expand the track as I went. But I wanted to kind of challenge myself and use like a trammel and use like an edge guide and show a different way to make it. I didn't have any issues with tear out. You know, it was a brand new bit, so that probably helped. But yeah, the tambour is really what I found is that making a little bit wider track than you think you need is really key, because it's such a pain when it starts to like gum up the works and jam up. But what I'm building right now is like, it's just a prototype. I'm experimenting mostly with the tambour itself to see if I can make it stronger, thinner, just kind of more elegant looking. The last time I made it, it was really chunky and really fragile. Pattern plywood's not strong. And what I was talking about before about veneering the pattern plywood, that's what I'm doing on this, where I'm veneering it and then backing it with walnut strips, and that makes it so it's super strong. And eventually I want to make like a big, like a tall cabinet out of it. And so it's sort of an experiment for that.
Gotcha. Have you ever played around with the SpectraPly products when you're doing your pattern plywood?
I have I have seen SpectraPly. It's hard to get in, if I remember correctly, it's hard to get in like a large sheet.
You can write emails and ask politely, because I think it starts its life in large sheets.
Okay.
But
yeah, I've had trouble figuring out if I can get enough of it to actually make a project out of, but I should look into it again. I know Miles, Make with Miles, he's used it for some of his turning projects, which are really cool.
It's big in the turning community. That's the circle that I hang out with.
Oh yeah, that's right. You're a turner.
Yeah, weird punk rock wood turner people. But Yeah, it's just it's another one of those like composite products that kind of slips under the radar, and then when it shows up, it's like, ooh, that's neat. But I don't know personally whether I think that the adhesive and the ability to sort of avoid a void or sidestep voids. Sorry, that's
Yeah,
a bunch
no,
of consonants headbutting each other in that sentence. Um, is as easy to do with Spectraply products as it is to do with the Baltic stuff that you've been working with.
Yeah, I would imagine it would be totally fine. I mean, the stuff that I work with does have kind of even Baltic birch plywood will have weird sort of knots and stuff that you find kind of deeper in the plywood. But yeah, I did experiment with skateboard veneers. So Roar Rocket, they're a Canadian company. They sell like dyed veneers. They sell kits to make your own skateboards. And I reached out to them, and they very nicely sent me a couple of like a pack of veneers. And I wish they had sent me like a massive pile of it. But I think it's pretty pricey stuff, and I think they make it themselves. They dye it themselves. And it's an elaborate process. I haven't been able to figure out, like, skateboard manufacturers use dyed veneers in their stuff, and I'm not sure where it comes from. I haven't been able to find the factory. So if anybody out there knows, ping me. But I've been curious about it. But Roar Rocket it's nice. They're thick veneers, and I can glue them on and build colored layers inside of I'll like glue it to the surface of the Baltic birch and then cut that apart, and then there will be a little strip that kind of highlights the pattern plywood, and it emboldens it. So like a lot of times the issue is when you step back, like, I don't know, a couple feet from the pattern plywood, it kind of just looks like a texture. It doesn't look like a pattern. But if you highlight it with like black veneer or magenta veneer, you can see it from a distance.
Very cool. Yeah, I know there's another company that offers a Spectraply type product, and in my mind's eye, all I can remember is that there's a frog involved, either in their name or in their logo.
Oh.
But again, like,
there's one there's a Japanese company that somebody was who was a importer actually reached out, and he's like, you want me to get some of this for you? And I lost his contact, but I was like, shipping it from Japan's pretty wild. It sounds expensive.
Yeah, I've also developed a kind of slight, I don't know if the obsession is the right word, but enthusiasm for artistic micarta, right? So again, it's a composite and a layup schedule, but when you're at sort of the artistic and not structural use per se, I think that those layups of the layers can be done with non-technical polyesters or even cotton fabrics, right? So you've seen maybe the guy who presses together glasses out of resin and like denim and stuff like that.
Yeah,
he's got ads and stuff on the internet box. That's a similar to micarta product that he's making, right? And so there are artists that exist in the dark corners of the Etsy universe that are taking colored fabrics and doing layup schedules that I can go anywhere from like Mexican blanket to the one that I'm obsessed with is it looks like a rainbow trout, right? So it's green to pink to silver with the spots and everything. I mean, like, it's really cool stuff.
Wow.
But again, I wonder if that could translate or point your work in a direction that neither one of us had considered until we got halfway through this conversation.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, send me a link to that because I'm interested. I have started like thinking about almost making my own plywood sometimes, where I'm like, oh, it would be cool if I could put a purple heart strip through here, or veneer, something thicker than like a, I've been working with like walnut veneered Baltic birch plywood, and it does put like a little stripe through it, which is pretty fun. And if I can just go a little bit further on that, I mean, the cool thing about the pattern plywood thing is it's wild. I never thought I would be making so much of it, but every time I experiment with it, I find like 6 more things I can do with it. And like this last one, I screwed up a cut and it ended up tapering. I still don't know what happened, but I had this giant, 2 3/4 inch thick block of glue up that I ran through the table saw in one pass, and that ended up tapering it. And I was realizing that the taper, I can create like almost a sunburst veneer on a piece. I can start like wrapping it around in a circle. If I get the taper right, I can create like a rounded thing. I did a bowl a few years ago that was done out of like segments. And I know this is an audio medium, but I do have like.
Well, again, we go live on visual platforms. Oh, that's dope.
So there we go. Yeah, people will have to go on YouTube to see it if they listen to this. But yeah, I made this bowl out of, it's a wood turner technique. You may know about it. It's I can't remember the term for it. It's a
bowl from a board and
segmented stave bowl.
Yeah.
So you cut staves, you cut them in, there's like a calculator to find the angles for it. And so I made these flat panels. These are flat panels. Then it's got the black veneer inside of it. And then these were, rectangular. And then I cut this compound angle, glued them together. And there's like, I looked up in a wood turner's book how to make these stave bowls. And you can calculate them from, like, they're calculators where you calculate the number of sides, how steep of an angle you want, and you can turn these bowls into any shape that you want. And then what wood turners do is they'll make them a little thicker, and then they'll turn it down so that they're round. I just didn't turn it because I think this thing would probably explode, and I also don't have a big lathe. So.
It would be really exciting to try and push a tool through a composite material that's glued up thusly. That doesn't mean it can't be done. That doesn't mean it can't be done, but that's like a pucker factor of 9. Like that's,
for a wood turner at level 1. So
yeah,
maybe level 0.
You could potentially undo a lot of really, really hard work.
Yeah, no thanks. I think I'll stay. Maybe I'll make a smaller one and we'll give it a go.
There you go. That sounds like a plan. But yeah, the segmented guys are nuts. And again, I think it all just sort of works together. There's people that use pattern plywood, especially Spectraply, in segmented work to do what are called dizzy bowls, is what they're traditionally referred to. So,
dizzy bowls.
Yeah. So in addition to building your rings as you lay up a segmented piece, right? And again, you've got calculators for how many angles and then, how big the gap between your pieces are so you can build your rings out into what we will refer to as a general bowl shape, right? When you start adding plywood and pattern pieces into it, you're getting yourself sort of bonus pieces. And when that's the Spectraply or another composite product in there, you can then, instead of aligning it so that all of your grain kind of lines up and gets mathematical, you can start twisting your layers as you build it out, and you can create spirals, or you can start altering the thickness of your rings as you build it up also. And so you start getting really wild. Hey,
welcome back.
You get really, really wild designs. So if you want to go down a rabbit hole of Google Images, will probably point you the first direction for dizzy bowl turning.
Dizzy bowls. Okay, I'll have to check that out.
And it works really well also when you're building what's referred to as a bowl from a board, right? So you can build what is basically a cutting board style piece of stock to begin with. And then with some clever sawing, either with a scroll saw or with your bandsaw on an angle, you can build yourself out these monstrous composite wood pieces that are pretty stunning to look at. But I mean, if you use Quick and Thick, you could probably knock it out in the better part of a day and a half of just Quick and Thick. Oh, that is the Tight Bond wood adhesive that I prefer when I'm doing layup stuff. So it comes in a gray bottle.
Okay. And
the running joke is that I like my Tight Bond how I like my significant others, which is Quick and Thick. Yeah. But you can go from liquid glue to something that has enough holding power to turn in like 40 minutes.
Oh wow.
Yeah, with a good clamp, with quick and thick. It's
Okay.
pretty cool stuff.
That's
So
good to know. I'm just getting into turning. Ashley and I took a class at the Port Townsend School of Woodworking, which is awesome. It was so fun. But I've got a mini lathe, the Rockler mini lathe, that I made a flip top mini lathe that comes out of my miter station. And so, but I'm starting to get the bug of the wood turning, which everybody's like, you're going to buy a bigger lathe almost immediately.
Well, and again, like you need to put a picture of Stan Lee on the side of that thing pointing at, doesn't it say Excelsior on the side of it?
It is an Excelsior. Yeah, that's good.
That's a good lathe.
I love that I left and it turned into wood turning.
Wait,
How did that happen?
Can you show Jessie the bowl one more time? Just because I don't know if she got to see this thing.
In this thing?
Oh my gosh.
That's what I said.
That's insane.
Quite literally.
It was a lot of work.
Wow. It's beautiful.
Thanks. Yeah, I want to try and make another one.
If anybody is listening to this show instead of watching it for whatever reason, stop what you're doing. We're at minute, give or take 36 and a half of the show. It would be your second viewing of the breathtaking stave bowl that Michael did with patterned plywood.
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's beyond cool, man.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll have to do another one at some point. I mean, the crazy thing about them is that like they can be a million different shapes depending on what angles you choose and how many sides you use. I did a little reel. I was using the new Festool table saw. They're like mini table saw, battery powered table saw, which sets angles like to the 10th of a degree, like just by like turning a knob, and it's insane. It's so ridiculously like precise, but it also sets the height as well to like precision levels. And so I cut a whole bunch of these like stave bowl. I just used the same calculator, and I made like 4 of them with different numbers of sides inside of like 20 minutes. And so they can be all sorts of different shapes and sizes. Like I did one with 5 sides, 10 sides. That one's 12 sided. And yeah. Is
that a sponsorship for you?
They're yeah, I mean, yeah, they sponsor content. We don't have like I'm not like contracted with them, but they will they'll pay for reels every once in a while, and I'm gonna go to their 100th anniversary, which is next week, which is gonna be really fun. I've been to Festool HQ twice now, and they're awesome. I've really enjoyed working with them. And Sedge, I'm sure hopefully you guys have met Sedge, because he's just the best dude ever. We hang out with Sedge in his studio with every Festool thing ever, and we get to play around. We did a charity build of a bench. Basically it's 2 teams. They've done this several times with several different makers, and I did the one last February. It's 2 teams, and they each get half of the workshop, and everything's set up for them. And Sedge is there, along with like Ronnie Fulton was there, and the guys from Shaper Tools. They're there as well to like assist you and find the tools that you need. And 5 makers, I hadn't met any of them in person. Josh Hescott is the only person that I had like talked with before, and so 2 teams of 5 makers, and I didn't know anybody. And then all of a sudden we're like, here's a slab, make something out of it. And you have we had 8 hours the first day, and then we had like 4 hours the second day to put finish on it. And we did this like Nakashima inspired bench with spindles. And I was like we came up with the idea, and I talked to Sedge about it. I was like, this is a cool idea and a good use for this slab, but is it possible for 5 of us to make this in 8 hours? And he was like, you would be surprised at what gets made in this shop in 8 hours with this many people. And sure enough, we got it done. And it was so fun. It was a lot of makers that just work by themselves all the time, working together as a team. And it was a blast. I really, that was one of the most fun build experiences from being the YouTuber or whatever I am so far. It's really cool.
That's amazing. We got to chat with Josh one day.
Nice.
We adore him. He's
such a good dude.
Really cool.
Yeah, he's a great dude. We hung out for almost that entire, like, we were he was on my team, obviously, and then we hung out and got dinner and the whole time that we were there. He's such a good dude.
He's awesome. That's awesome. What else? I mean, what other experiences have you gotten from being a part of the community? I mean, anything else that stands out aside from the festival thing?
I mean, the collabs are always just fantastic, and I'm hoping to do more of that in the coming year. Now that I don't have a house that I'm building, I went down and I built a boat with Jason Hibbs. I had literally met him once at Workbench Con, and I was like, "Hey, I'm in Seattle. You're down in Oregon. Maybe we could hang out." And then he's like, "Just name a time and come on down." And so I was like, well, we found a week that worked for both of us, and I took the train down to Oregon, which was super fun. And we, like, I don't know, I had spent less than like 30 minutes with the guy. I talked to him briefly, was introduced to Workbench Con, and but we hit it off immediately, and we were like, what should we build? We settled on a boat. We wanted to build a speedboat. We wanted to build it without plans, and we wanted to build a small one. I'd seen these things called cocktail racers, and they're little boats that are, they just have like it's designed to be made with one sheet of plywood, so they're only 8 feet long, or you're able to stretch it a little bit by going diagonal across the sheet of plywood. And so we did it without any scarf joints. That was part of it. We didn't want to have to rely on scarf joints, which is like when you overlay 2 sheets of plywood and glue them together. So anyway, that was like, I spent a week with Jason. We built this boat and made it happen. It was impressively pretty. It did not function super well. I've learned a lot about boat making since, and we're talking about doing another one probably this year. Ashley's on maternity leave, so we may drive down to Oregon and hang out and make some stuff. We haven't set a date yet, but that's cool. And then Chris Salamone, I got to build a really early on, like within the first 2 years that I was doing YouTube. We did a collab together and built a desk and drawer combo, and we designed it together online beforehand in SketchUp. And then I flew down to LA and built in his shop. And it's always fun to hang out in somebody else's shop and make something. And I highly encourage that for people, even if you're not like, making YouTube videos, to be like, hey, maybe we should try and build something together. Just like, even if it's a small project, because you learn a lot from working directly with somebody else, like workflow or just little tips and tricks, things that don't even come through in video, but they're just like, shop organization and stuff like that. With Jason, it was like, I need to own a Capex. That was the big one. He had 2 at the time. He had 1 on each side of his shop because he didn't want to be so far away from the Capex.
Oh my God,
that's ridiculous.
I feel like we've all sort of had that moment, right, where we think to ourselves, you know what, self, I need a Capex.
Yep.
Or 2.
Yeah. No, I keep denying myself that pleasure for reasons I haven't been able to figure out yet.
Yeah, I feel like I have up until now. Now I'm working with Festival, but I used to have these like conversations with my brother where I would call him and I'm like, Keith, I'm about to spend a stupid amount of money on one tool. Am I allowed to do this? And he would be like, it's for the business, right? And I'm like, it's for the business. And then I would go out and I would spend the money.
It's a write-off.
It's a write-off, yeah.
Who'd you write that off to? I don't know.
Yeah.
Mike, unfortunately, we are starting to get to the end of our hour that we promised that we'd keep the show to. And so that means we do need to do one more lap through sponsors. Cool. And then we'll get to the final question. So real quick, Hannah and the team over at Surf Prep, thank you again for your support. If you guys haven't taken a close look at the Surf Prep dust collection system, it burps the filters to make sure that everything flows right. And let me tell you, the first time that you try sanding drywall with something that doesn't have an exhaust filtration system, you learn real quick that all of your efforts to suck up dust very quickly get blown across the rest of the furniture in the room. So yeah, take a close look at that if you are in the drywall or paint finishing business. Really, really cool dust collection system. Layla over at Casey Bombshell Design, thank you for hosting our website. Boys and girls, children of all ages, and folks who may be undefined otherwise, get yourself an oversized Sawdust Talk t-shirt. The fabric is so soft. It's so comfy. And wouldn't you love to be rocked to sleep within the fine threads emblazoned with a Sawdust Talk logo? I know I do. And then we have Makers for St. Jude. Get involved. Get awesome. Let's raise some money in 2025. If you have questions or you don't know how to get started, or you have a piece and you want to auction it off, but you don't know if it's good enough, or you don't know how to put together the website, find me. Find Mike. Find Jessie. We will hold your hand. We will make this happen for you. And if in your generous hearts you think you could part with $5 or more a month in the name of supporting Sawdust Talk on Patreon, boy howdy, we'd sure appreciate it. You could change Jessie's day for $5 a month. Think about it. Patreon/Sawdust Talk. Other Mike, not Makers for St. Jude Mike. Final question of every episode. Every guest gets asked for a motivational thought, a quote, a reason to kick open the door to their workshops, maybe pick up a tool for the second time, third time, fifth time, 20th time that day, or for the first time in a month. But what gets you excited? What makes you ready to get awesome and make a mess?
I should have had something prepared. I think, I mean, right now I'm like in this mode of this year. I really want, I don't know who I've been hearing it from. I feel like Adam Savage has mentioned it. I feel like it's kind of in the air of like building without a plan. Like this idea of you need to start trusting your own instincts that it will come out okay, which I struggle with. I'm just very, I'm like mildly OCD. So I really like to have everything organized, know I have all the materials, but starting to trust the instincts as a creator, as a creative person, and go with the flow of a project as opposed to feeling like everything needs to be dialed in right before you start. Something that I've been struggling with, and I really want to let go of in this year and see kind of what happens when you don't really make a plan and you just kind of make stuff and experiment, like not feeling like the project has to be the final piece in the puzzle, but maybe this is a prototype. It's okay for it to just be a prototype.
I think that's really great advice, actually, because I mean, how many people go to YouTube University and think they need XYZ to even get started, to start that project, and then have all the fancy tools, everything lined up, A to Z before they get started. So that's actually really, really good advice.
I can dig it.
Hopefully it resonates with people, because it's something that I've been really it got me excited for this year. I was like, I don't have to be on rails. I don't have to like the house was like, I need this done in this way, and it was very regimented. So to have that freedom again, and to think about when you go into your shop that you have a lot of freedom, is uh, is awesome. And taking baby steps and not feeling like you have to like understand this project before you start it, I think is going to help. Like maybe just experiment, maybe just kind of try some shapes, cut some stuff on the jigsaw or the bandsaw and see what comes from those shapes. It's like it's hard to start from a blank sheet of paper. So make something dumb and ugly and get it out of the way, and then build off of that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's important.
Well, Michael, thank you for joining us for episode 145 of Sawdust Talk. We really appreciate your time and the chat tonight. This has been awesome. And TJ, why don't you take us out?
That's right. All right. To those of you watching and to those of you listening, thank you for sticking around, and we will see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.